Hello, everyone. It's Alison and I'm here with Melissa Wright, and we're with Guided Life by Design and Surrender Story. And today I have convinced Melissa, I've invited Melissa to do a brief walkthrough of my personal human design chart. And there are a couple of reasons I have asked Melissa to do this. Number one, I absolutely love my human design chart. And I do my best really every day to surrender to it, just as we talk about. But it's honestly been a really long time since I've had my chart explained to me or read for me. And Melissa's really amazing at it. And so I just thought it would be really fun. The second reason that I've asked Melissa to do this is because we've noticed in our communities and just in conversations that we're having with people in our daily lives that a lot of people are really intrigued by human design, but still really confused. And so people don't understand why they would want to know about their human design chart, why they would want to run their chart and learn about it and start to surrender to it. They definitely know that we are huge advocates, that we're both pretty obsessed with it because of the changes that it has made in our own lives. And yet I think just getting started can feel a little overwhelming, which I can totally relate to. So that's what we're here to do today. So Melissa, I'm so excited.
Me too. I think this is going to be really fun, and hopefully this can be a little bit more tangible look at human design. One of the things that's challenging for us, we both have been studying human design for years now, and we are the type of people that feel drawn to want to know all the details and all the ins and outs, and we want to know all the gates and all the channels and all of that level of detail. And so sometimes it can be challenging for us to explain human design to other people without feeling that need to share all of that. And sometimes we know that that can feel really overwhelming. And so we want people to know too that you don't need to have that same desire to go to that level of detail, to spend years and years studying it for it to change your life. So we're really hoping that, giving kind of like this little keynote can give you, if you fit in that category of feeling overwhelmed by all of the detail in human design, a better picture into how you actually use this in your day-to-day life too. So yeah. All
And
right.
as you were saying that, Melissa, that took me back just a few years ago when I did hear my human design for the first time. And I just remember how much it resonated and how validating it was. And so many of our clients have also said that. So it just kind of took me back, and I'm excited to go back in time a little bit before I knew everything that I know now and hear it again for, well, maybe it won't feel like the first time, but.
Yeah, well, and if you think back to when you first found human design, what do you think it was that led you to human design?
Well, you and I talk about this, but I mean, for me personally, it was very much a divine guidance. So I had started on a very personal spiritual journey that had me turning it into tuning in, and there were some things that just kind of fell in front of me that I really felt drawn to, and it was almost just like taking that next step of those crumbs that were falling in, having no idea that it would lead me here today. But I remember again, the first time I kind of heard about it, and definitely the first time I had my chart explained to me, that it really just resonated to my core. And yeah, so.
Interesting. Yeah. And if I think back to what I was doing before, I also felt divinely led to get to human design. But I would say there's probably about a 10-month period where I was really trying to tune in and access my own internal guidance, or access, I guess my intuition is probably what I was hoping for. And back then I was spending hours and hours every day meditating. So I was intentionally trying to pull myself out of the busyness of my normal routines and responsibilities, and really trying to get still and quiet so that I could trust that guidance I was getting from inside. And so I would spend hours meditating, and I would spend hours journaling and doing all these things. And I do think that it was because I was on that really intense search for my guidance and to kind of
Mhm.
turn down and pull myself out of that busyness and like that typical like normal life where every day has its that same routine that you do over and over again. That was kind of like making me feel like my soul was dying a little bit. And so I really think that finding human design was the answer to that.
Mhm.
And what I love about human design is that you can access that wisdom or figure out how to hear that wisdom without spending hours and hours a day meditating and journaling. And I no longer need to do that to access that wisdom. So I think, yeah, so I think I'm most excited to realize that, right? That it doesn't require hours and hours
Mhm.
once you learn how to pinpoint and understand and hear your own body's wisdom.
That's really interesting. I actually don't know that I knew that about you about the hours of meditation and journaling, but I was doing the same thing when I found human design and
Really?
really, yeah, and like hours and hours. And it's
Right.
something I still enjoy doing, but you're right. I don't feel like I have to do that. I feel like I am more in tune with the way I was created to go about my day and make decisions and engage with the world and do all of those things. I do still enjoy that, but it is what led me, and it's not something that I feel like it's my only way now.
Right. Well, and hopefully with us sharing this information, like maybe we can help the people that are have that same desire to access their inner wisdom
Hmm.
to not need to spend, weeks or
Right,
even months spending hours and hours a day or feel
right,
like it's hopeless if you can't do that.
right. Yeah.
So yeah, so this is Allison's chart. This is one of the softwares that we use for ourselves, for our families, and for the people that we work with. We actually have another one that even goes deeper than this, but this is a really, really great place to start. So, and I know, like, if you've never seen a human design chart, that this can look really overwhelming. And actually, there's probably even more detail in this chart than you even realize by looking at it. So essentially what we're looking at here are the 9 energy centers. And the 9 energy centers, we do have, it does start from the 7 chakras. So if anyone is here and watching and you're familiar with the 7 chakras, it's similar, but human design believes we've actually evolved to being 9 centered. And so each of these centers has a different type of energy that it governs. So we can tell a lot by looking at someone's chart, which type of energy they're consistent in the way that they process and understand that energy, and which ones they're not consistent. So they're going to be more vulnerable to the energy they're going to absorb from other people. So Allison has 4 of the 9 that are defined, that are consistent. And one of the first things that we look at, when we see the ones that are defined, they're the ones that are colored. So we have green, we have brown, and we have red, and the ones that are defined in Allison's chart. There's another one that could be yellow. It's yellow on mine, but and so that's what we're looking at, where we want to see, like, are these centers, are they colored or are they white? And the other thing that we look at are the lines that go in between the centers. Okay, so that's why these centers are colored, because they have a full line that's colored in between. So you can see all of them. And we look to see the ones that are colored, if the lines connect to all of the centers or if there's a split. So Allison and I both, we have a single definition. You can see that shows up over here too, the definition. So Allison is single. And what that means is that, at least in this aspect of her chart, she's a little less likely to get sucked into a codependent relationship than if she had a split. So people that have a split, they're going to look for other people to fill in the gap in the line that's missing, that would then connect the energy of all of those centers. So yeah, so Allison is a single definition. Now that doesn't mean having a single definition that Allison is going to want to be single, or that she's not going to want to have those special relationships in her life. Like, we all definitely want to have, those love relationships, romantic and otherwise, that we have special people that make life more enjoyable and more fun.
Which I just want to say something about that, because I remember when I heard that, I don't feel like I need somebody necessarily. I lived on my own for quite a period of time through my 20s, into my 30s, but I also really enjoy like a partnership, like a romantic relationship, sharing responsibilities with Brett and things like that. But then even as I was thinking about like going on my own as an entrepreneur, I definitely felt like our partnership was absolutely the way I wanted to work versus being like a solopreneur. So it's interesting to me that even though my chart sort of shows that I can be on my own, I would say, yes, that's true, but I really prefer to be in a relationship, a partnership, like with working with at least one other person.
Right. And that makes sense too. Like there's some other parts of Allison's chart that would kind of lead that way. So one of them that I'll mention, I'm going to go to the profile next. So you'll see like 2 down from definition, there's profile. Now, Allison's profile is the hermit opportunist, and you'll see the numbers here, the 2 and the 4. Those are found in the top 2 squares on both the black side and the red side. So it's the number that comes after the decimal. This is what tells us someone's profile. And this is kind of like the costume that you wear. Allison does a much better job of explaining like how profile shows up. Do you want to know?
I don't necessarily, but okay, I guess what I always say, I just say what you said, but I do see it as kind of when I get done with somebody's entire chart, I go to profile. This is just the way my brain works, but it's kind of like the costume that you wear, that is on your personality side and on your design side that comes together, and it kind of overlays and makes it's another layer of uniqueness to you, when we're looking at like the finite details of your chart.
Yeah. Okay. So the 2 is the hermit. Okay. This is where the hermit comes in. So hermits, what that means is that this is another place where you're going to need alone time. So you're going to need times when you can be alone and not in the energy of other people so that you can recharge. It doesn't mean that you can't enjoy being, going to a party and being with your friends or being with the family. But after that time, in order to recharge your batteries, you're going to need that time by yourself.
And I absolutely feel that. And everybody who knows me well knows that about me, 100%.
And then on the other side is the 4. So here's one of the contradictions here too. And like, we're all going to have contradictions. There's parts of our chart that are going to kind of pull us in 2 different directions. So the 4 is the opportunist. This is also known as like the networker. So while Allison needs that time by herself, it's also really important that she has her network of people that she can share life with, right? That she can be around, she can draw energy from when she wants to do that, and then kind of have her time by herself. So it makes perfect sense with the 4. And also with a profile 4, whether it's on the black side or red side, the opportunities, the relationships, the career paths, all of those opportunities for a 4 profile are most likely to come through your known network. So people that have a 4 are not going to do as well with like paid advertising if you're in business or, kind of.
Well, even social media, I think. I mean, a lot of people in our groups and things like that are from my network, but at the same time with social media, there's like a lot of people that are not in my network. And so I think it's hard sometimes for me with social media too.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. And like my profile is a 3-5, so I'm the opposite. I actually do better with strangers than I do with like I'm not good at networking. Like I don't do well in networking groups. And so it's kind of interesting to see that.
Which I wouldn't have thought I was a networker before, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think it being on my design side,
Right.
it doesn't resonate quite as much as the hermit, which is on my personality side. But after I really like was able to think about it and think about how I work and all of that, I can definitely see, the networker and the 4.
Right. Right. And that's a good thing too. So like if you're not familiar with the human design chart, the black side, which is the personality side, these traits that get activated on our black side are who we think we are, right? So these are traits that we're likely to identify with and recognize and see in ourselves. Whereas the red side, this is our design side. So these traits tend to be more at the unconscious level. So it is really key in who we are. It's just oftentimes kind of that program that runs under the surface that we're not as aware of, that is harder for us to see in ourselves, but people that know us well are likely to easily identify. So like people that know Alison well, you probably are like, of course you're an amazing networker. You like make everyone feel comfortable. Like you make everyone feel welcome. You're so kind and thoughtful, and you're always thinking about other people. Like, of course you're just this natural networker. But yeah, so it's really interesting how that happens too, where we have our conscious traits on the black side and our unconscious traits on the red side.
Yeah.
The other thing that is really interesting to look at kind of at the deeper level is the type of channels that we have. So the channels that we have, those lines that go in between our centers, these are our natural gifts and strengths. And there's three main types of channels, or they're also called circuits in human design. So we have our individual, which Alison does not have any individual channels activated in her chart. And individual energy is that people that have individual channels, they're here to like help the collective move into a new way of being or doing or thinking. So they're here to shake things up and like really innovate and kind of mutate what we do as a collective. Okay, so, and also I like to think about like really, if you think about, and we're not trying to be political here at all, or like kind of start a conversation, but when you think about like the vaccines over the last 2 years, or even masks, people who kind of have that opinion that like, I'm going to take care of me, you take care of you, and don't ask me to give up my own freedoms to take care of the rest of the people. Like I'll make sure I'm healthy and safe, you make sure you're healthy and safe, and we'll be okay. So that's kind of the individual energy, if that makes sense. So Alison doesn't have any of that. Well, it's not that she doesn't have any of that. She doesn't have any full channels. She does have some gates that are individual. So there is some of that energy, but the next type would be collective. So collective is about forgoing what I need as an individual to take care of the greater good. So it's, and Alison has 2 channels that are collective, and there's 2 different types of collective energy. There's logic, which is good at recognizing patterns to be able to predict the future. So it's more future focused. And then there's abstract, which is more about like over time, looking back and kind of connecting the dots and pulling the insight and wisdom of the lived experiences, but it takes some time for that insight to come. So it's more past focused. So Alison has one of each. So she has this logic collective from the ajna, which is the way of like thinking and conceptualizing and ideas and perceptions that's connected to the throat. So she's going to have a really logical way of thinking and need to be able to kind of lay things out in a logical sequence to express it, which is really interesting. When we try to plan things together in our business, she wants to have like the detailed outline of here's the sequence that makes sense. Whereas I don't have that same logical way of expressing. So sometimes it can be interesting when we try to plan things, like even, maybe doing like a little video like this to share in the group. But yeah, so she has this amazing ability to put things in a logical sequence. This is a channel that's all about organizing things. So yeah, that's one of Alison's natural gifts and talents, is to have that really detailed, organized structure for things. Anything you want to add on that one?
I don't know if this fits into this, but I think this could fit into another area of my chart too. But I think it's one of the reasons that, well, a couple of things. Number one, when I present somebody's chart, like I would do it differently than you would, because it goes in a logical sequence in my mind differently than how you present. But the other thing that kind of comes to mind is I definitely have already started, but I know I'm going to write at least one book someday. And I feel like that kind of comes from there because I can organize all of the information in a way that's nonfiction, that's in a way that like I think will be shared effectively. Do you think that comes, I know that can come from another area, but do you think that comes from there too?
Oh, 100%, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that does give you a consistent way of speaking. So like once you've figured out the way that you perceive something, the way you understand something, you would be able to express those ideas or insights or that thought process in the same way over and over again. And you'd almost want to, right? Like there's going to be comfort when you have that ability to express that thing the same way over and over again, when you feel like, okay, this is how it makes sense. If I say it this way, I understand it, other people are going to understand it. And yeah.
Yes. And even just as a manifester, what like peace is my signature emotion. So it's like that's in a couple of places where it feels very peaceful to me to figure out the way that makes sense and then stick with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Where I'm the opposite, like my throat gets defined from my spleen, which is very intuitive, and I've got, the gate 20, which is in the now. So the way that I express things changes based on who I'm with and what comes through in the moment. And it's feels like death to me to try to like pre-plan it out and have it in a logical sequence. My brain does not actually work in a logical sequence, but my ajna is undefined. So it's going to be fluid and flexible, and it's going to change based on my energy that day or who I'm around. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we love about human design too, because human design is about creating that space for everyone to be who they were naturally designed to be and honoring what makes us different and unique. And, Alison and I now have this understanding of each other that like, she's not going to expect me to try to change and be more logical and say things the same way that she would say it every time. And she can just honor and appreciate that that's just never going to happen. Every time I say something, it's going to come out different. It's going to come out in a different order and sequence. And, as we create slides for our clients together, every time she opens a new one I do, it's going to be in a different order, and she's never going to know where to find things. But yeah, so. And if she didn't understand my human design chart, then maybe that would drive her crazy. But now it just makes her smile, right?
Right. Yeah, 100%.
Entertaining.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then Allison's other collective, sorry, these little boxes like to open on me, is this one that goes from her solar plexus to the throat. So this one is connecting her emotional awareness center to that throat through that manifestation and communication center. And so, like I said, this one's abstract, which is more about needing time to really feel into the experience. It's going to have that desire to have new experiences, to always be growing and learning and experiencing the full spectrum of emotions, so that she can gain that insight and wisdom that she feels called to share. So both of the collective, both logic and abstract, is about sharing. So she's going to feel compelled to share her insight and wisdom that she gets from both of those channels. So yeah, the work that we do in sharing human design, that comes from her having these two channels that kind of drives that need and desire and passion for sharing the wisdom and insight that she's gained through her experiences to help other people, and hopefully to learn things in an easier, more peaceful way than she did. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that even if I look just at my career journey, I chose a career in state government, public health, which really is like for the greater good of the whole, doesn't really matter, politically, anything like that. And so I think that, and then it's just shifted, recently to another way of serving what I think is the greater good of the whole and sharing human design with the collective. So I definitely feel those. And then I also think, same thing when you were talking about this, that this probably is also where that book that is coming, like one of those books, is because it's like reflecting on my journey and sharing that with others in hopes to, for lots of reasons, but just to help people relate to, but also to maybe prevent other people from going through some of the hard things that I went through. And I think the reason that I went through those is so that I can eventually bring my story out and help others. So I can feel it from both of those.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so really too, it's interesting to have a channel that goes from the solar plexus to the throat. So Allison has a defined solar plexus, which means she has the emotional authority. There's a hierarchy. So anyone that has the solar plexus defined is going to have an emotional authority. So her body is going to generate emotional waves to help her to gain insight and wisdom and get clarity on the choices she's making in her life. And so through experiencing that emotional wave, it's going to give her mind the ability to think through her options from all the different perspectives as she's at different points along the emotional wave. And so what that means is she's not able to make quick in the moment decisions. She needs time to really feel into it and to make sure that her emotional wave has settled. So oftentimes we'll use the analogy of dropping a pebble into a body of water, like a little pond or a lake or whatever. And as you drop that pebble in, it creates those ripple waves. And that's what happens. Her body is generating emotional waves that are similar to those ripple waves. So the bigger the decision, the bigger the stone, and the bigger the waves, and the longer it'll take to get back to that still, calm state emotionally for her to have that clarity to know what's correct. So yeah. And because she has that direct channel, the full colored channel, even though half of it is red and unconscious, that's going to give her more of an ability to express what she's feeling than someone who wouldn't have that full channel. So someone can be emotional, but not have that direct connection to get that energy to express through their throat. And they would have a harder time actually expressing their emotions or their feelings. So that's really interesting too. And the other thing that I've realized in getting to know Allison over these last few years and working together is I think because she has this channel, it actually helps her to be able to talk it out and express it for her to fully feel into what she's feeling and what feels correct and not. Do you agree with that?
Yes. And I think everybody who's really close in my inner circle would know that I really like to talk it out and talk about my emotions and how I'm feeling. Yes.
Yes. And it's interesting too, especially when she's struggling with something or she's uncertain and she hasn't reached that clarity and she's like, I'm so sorry that I'm like, taking our time to talk this out. And I'm like, like there's nothing to apologize for because I can just feel that that's how she is processing what she's thinking and what she's feeling. That's going to help her to get to that clear, calm, neutral state where she's going to feel certain that she's making the right choices in her life too. So yeah.
Hey, and I laugh about it now. I'm laughing about it now because now that I understand my emotions, my emotional center and how this all works, um, it has brought a lot of just insight and peace into my life and I can lean into it. But I look back and see how painful this was for me personally on my journey because I didn't realize, number one, that I was emotional. I didn't know how to, for much of my life, I talked about I lived on my own and I didn't have somebody, I had people that were close to me, but, I didn't really know how to express those emotions or how to deal with those. And I know my emotions are pretty like high and low. And I think for so long, I felt like there was something wrong with me or other people didn't experience what I was experiencing. And so there was a lot of like stuffing emotions and not dealing with emotions. And really, really, I can look back and see how that greatly impacted my journey for sure.
Yeah. And I think for people that are emotional, like that like technique or like coping mechanism of trying to stuff down or like avoid the low part of emotional waves, that I think is what creates most of the trauma that like emotional people are experiencing. And
Mhm.
then what's really interesting is the people around you who are not emotional, who have the solar plexus undefined, they're going to absorb that energy, especially the energy that you are avoiding and stuffing down. And then they're going to not only reflect it back to you, but what they reflect back is then going to be an amplified version of that emotion. And then it's really easy for people that are emotional to blame that person for creating that, that emotion or that emotional energy. But in truth, it's not even them that's doing it. They're just reflecting it. And that's most often going to happen with the ones that you're trying to hide from or avoid.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's going to feel even more unpleasant to have this person come reflect back this amplified version of it because you didn't want to go there. And you knew like I'm avoiding that.
Right.
Why are you bringing that energy in here? But really just so if you are emotional and you have people in your life that you feel like are bringing that intense emotion that's not pleasant, then maybe just stop and act like, or ask yourself, like, am I avoiding something? And is there a gift in me understanding and really feeling and being with this emotion as opposed to trying to hide from it? Because when we try to stuff down and hide from those emotions, it actually takes longer for the emotional wave to settle and to reach that point of clarity. So really, if you're emotional and you're watching this, and again, like if you look at your chart, and definitely if you haven't looked at your chart yet, this mybodygraph.com website, you can get a free chart and get all the information that you see here on Allison's chart for completely free. And so you'll be able to tell if this triangle on the right side is brown, then yes, you're emotional like Allison.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And honestly, every aspect of the chart is fascinating and we could talk all day, but I feel like we could talk all day just on emotions.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the last channel that Allison has also connects to her solar plexus and it connects to the heart center. This little red triangle is the heart center. And this one is a tribal. So this is the other type of circuit, tribal. And tribal is all about support. It's about creating the systems and structures for the tribe to survive and thrive. And so that energy is all about finding your people, right? Identifying the tribe that's the correct tribe. And so when you have tribal energy, it is important to feel like you're part of a tribe. So I don't know, Allison, do you want to talk a little bit about how this like tribal energy shows up for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know specifically this channel, so I'm trying to go away from like the theme of the channel and just do that. But I mean, for sure, it is really important to me in terms of like when you talk about individual, that doesn't really resonate a whole lot, but like tribal 100%, like the close groups that I'm a part of, whether it's my family or my friends group, or even like when I worked apart from like the big picture, like collective, the people that I worked directly with were very important to me in terms of making sure that everybody was thriving in all of these situations and yeah, all of that. So
Yeah. And then, right. And you layer that on with the 4, right? So that tribal energy plus having your people that are your network in the 4, like that's, those complement each other really well. So yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about specifically this channel. So this channel, it's actually called the channel of community. And it's really all about creating those fair, equitable exchanges. It's bargaining. It's the energy that when you commit to something, you're going to follow through, and you would never want to feel like you didn't live up to your end of the bargain. And if you're in a relationship where you feel like someone didn't live up to their end, it's really likely for that to end that connection with that person, to end that relationship. And it's going to be really hard to forgive someone that you feel like doesn't live up to that fair bargain. And so it'll be really important to make sure that you feel like that bargain is communicated, right? That like it's agreed to, it's going to need to be really clear cut. Like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And this is what you're going to do. And this is how it's fair. And yeah. And this is actually the energy. This is one of the energies that of our current global cycle. And we're definitely not going to go too far here, but we're at the end of like the 400 something year cycle in human design. So it cycles every 400 and I think it was like 20 something years. Anyway, not important. I'm getting sidetracked by details that don't even matter. But in 2027, we're moving into the next cycle. And so this is the energy of the cycle we've been in, this 40-37. And this is actually the energy where the whole dowry system was created, was in this bargain, right? So like, you can have my daughter for 3 sheeps and, I don't know, whatever it is. So like back in the day, hundreds of years ago when that started, I don't know, maybe it was even more than that. I don't even know when it started, but that's the energy of like that bargain or trade. And it's also that tribal energy, right? Where we're like all in this together. So that's part of what's breaking down. So it'll be interesting to see the new energy when we don't have this, where we're like all in it together, what's going to change. But that's a whole another topic that we'll save for another day. But yeah, anything else that you want to add about that specific channel?
Well, I mean, I will just say that like each one of these though, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this resonates so much. But I can think back and look at how this impacted me in my work, things having to be fair within the group. And if something wasn't fair, like the exchange, the workload, what was being done, like it really, really, really upset me. And my boss could attest to this, my old boss. But also in my family with 2 siblings, my mom and I, just, it's not fair. Well, it's not about equal. So every person needed to be treated equally. I'm a mom now. I know how hard that is, but that was always really important to me. And then really, I think back to even like in high school, I was on a dance team and my aunt was the coach. And we had tryouts the fair way to, get the dance team together. And I would have been with these girls for years. And a couple of girls didn't make the squad. And then a foreign exchange student came in who was a phenomenal dancer. I mean, the best out of everybody, but they didn't make her try out. They just put her on. And I was like, that's not fair. You cannot do that. And it was all about it didn't even impact me directly, but it wasn't fair to me to not have her do tryouts. And those other 2 girls who did try out weren't put on. So I ended up quitting the squad. Okay. And yeah. And so it's like, I can really see how the tribe and the fair exchange with the tribe has always been very, very important to me.
Yeah, so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so these energies with these channels and these centers that are colored in Alison, this is who she consistently is. And this is the energy that she is able to rely on. And this is what gives her her natural gifts and strengths. And she's going to have this energy regardless of who she's around, the environment she's in. This is always going to kind of drive who she is and how she is and how she interacts with other people. And then she's got the 5 white centers. Now, usually when we look at a chart, we're going to look for one of the white centers that doesn't have any gate activations, and those are called completely open. So Alison doesn't have any that are completely open. So you'll see that there's at least one line leading up to all of her centers that has the color and has the little gray circle around the number. So in some ways, like it's not like, it's funny because I noticed I'm starting to describe that as like, that's a good thing, but really like human design, that's one of the things we want to break away from. It's not that it's good or bad or right or wrong. Her design is on purpose. It's intentional. It's perfect for her and the life purpose that she has to live, but she can at least avoid the intensity of having the challenge side of a completely open center, because then the energy can be a little bit more confusing, because having a gate activated in an undefined center can help to kind of give a theme or a frame of reference for the energy, how she perceives and processes that energy, even though the way that she perceives it is going to be affected by the people that she's around, by the energy that she's absorbing as different people come in and out of her aura. So our white centers, this is where our conditioning or our not self comes in. And so you can see over on the right, there's a not self theme for each of the centers. And really, like when we do deeper readings with people, this is where we go really deep into someone's chart, is really looking at the healthy versus unhealthy expression. We can do it for all the centers. There's still a healthy and unhealthy expression of the defined centers, but really where that becomes most helpful is understanding those undefined centers. And so, there are some keynotes that are listed here and some not self questions, but we even have some other questions. And how this helps is it really helps you to see where it is that pressure from other people, that external pressure that's making it harder for you to tune in to your own body's wisdom and guidance. So, for example, one of the ones that I know is intense for Allison is the G center. Okay, so the G center, this is one of the additional ones that's not one of the 7 chakras that you might be familiar with. And this is the center that's all about identity, love, and direction. So we talked about her having the single definition earlier, which leaves her less vulnerable to codependent relationships. Unfortunately, the contradiction she has in her chart, or not unfortunately, but again, it's not good or bad or right or wrong, but because she has this undefined G center, this does bring in that vulnerability or that susceptibility to getting involved in a codependent relationship because she doesn't have that fixed, consistent, reliable sense of identity or direction or love. So someone that has this undefined can look for other people to give them that sense of identity or that sense of love that is harder for them to feel on their own in their own energy. So yeah.
Amen to that. If you, we'll just
So-
say, if you look at my past, that is true for me. Yes.
Yes. And so identifying when you are in more of that unhealthy expression where you're looking for other people to define you or give you that sense of identity or make you feel that sense of love, once you identify that it's that pressure where I feel like I need to know who I am and where I'm going, and I can't keep leaving jobs because everybody's going to think I'm flaky and no one's going to love me if I keep doing this thing. Another thing that's really interesting that I find with this one is, you ever notice when like there's a kid around, one of the questions that people love to ask kids is like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? Like, and people that have an undefined G center, like they are going to feel the pressure where they feel like they should have an answer to that question. And maybe, the kids that have an undefined G center have even come up with an answer that they have like learned over time is an acceptable answer. Like maybe they'll say I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer because, there's money in their respective professions. But yeah, so do you remember when you were a kid, Allison, people asking you this question?
Yes. And I definitely will say that it changed. I mean, I never had a strong sense of what I was going to be ever. And I even went to college. I changed my major 4 times. I graduated and still went on to do something totally unrelated. And it does kind of make you feel like flaky because you see those people who are like, they're going to be this from the time they're young and they are on like a direct path and they never waver and that's what they are and they love it. And you're like, well, what's wrong with me? But yeah, this one just in so many ways I look at, it makes you feel like really, indecisive or flaky or not certain about things. But hearing this is like so much permission for me to just know that I'm not supposed to be a fixed person or in a fixed job or, those sorts of things.
Well, and I think probably this is a big contradiction too for that desire for peace as a manifestor.
100%.
So I'm sure your mind is like, oh, I would have so much more peace if I was just certain about my career path and I could just have that job and do it forever and just get really good at it and become successful and move up and advance. And
yeah. And I think back to, it's interesting, I married somebody who also doesn't have this defined, but I think back to really when I felt the most inauthentic and living just a way that didn't feel aligned. And I remember my friends would want me to go out to the bar and I just I would not want to, but I remember thinking, well, maybe if I go, I'll find the person I'm going to marry and then I can just be back to my little hermiting self that I want to be. And so I would go for that reason, not because I wanted to go do that or, whatever. So yeah, it's so many ways, this one.
right. Yeah. It's so fascinating. Yeah. Well, and so like I said before, there isn't a good or bad or right or wrong. And it's really easy when we have an undefined center to kind of be absorbing that pressure to be what we're not. That's usually what happens. We see other people, we think, oh, my life would be easier, right? The grass is always greener. If only I had this defined, fixed, solid, reliable sense of identity and I knew who I should be, and I wouldn't have to worry about that and figure it out or feel like uncertain about it, then life would be easier. But on the other side of that, each white center has this amazing potential for wisdom. So in experiencing lots of different identities and directions, and you have the ability to become really wise about this energy. And so it also gives someone with an undefined G center the ability to kind of be like that human BS meter, where you can just intuitively know and sense when someone's being authentic or not, right? Do you feel like you're pretty good at reading people and you kind of just
I don't know. I don't know if I really feel like I'm good at reading people, honestly. I really don't. I don't.
how about
I
people
don't know if
that
this,
you know well? Like if someone thing's bothering someone and you ask them how they are and they say they're fine, but you can kind of just read that they're not, maybe?
I don't know. That is not fair to me. But I don't know if this might have nothing to do with what you're talking about, but it's interesting that like in that story I just gave, way before I even knew about anything about human design, when I was living more aligned and like not forcing myself to do those things that I didn't want to do because of, thinking that I would get to where I wanted to go, like I can look back and my significant relationships, I all met that person out at a bar and it didn't end well. I mean, it just didn't end the way. But then I look and I was like sitting at home on a Friday night and literally out of nowhere was introduced to Brett through a mutual friend. So I don't know if that's not like the insight that you're talking about, but I don't know if that's like when you do kind of just live more in alignment that the right things happen in that way. Do you think that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, right.
But I'm gonna have to pay
But
more attention to whether or not I'm good at reading people. I just don't know if I am.
interesting. But it could be that you've like not allowed yourself to trust that.
And that could be too, for sure. Yeah.
Interesting. So the other advantage to having an undefined G center, oftentimes people that have an undefined G center are kind of like the social chameleon, where they can fit in with lots of different type of people, right? Because they have that ability to try on lots of different identities, and they have been in lots of different identities. So they can make friends really easily. They can connect with people really easily. They can fit in with all types of people. They're not judging people for who they are or what they are. And there's space for all of it and everyone and all the different colors and shapes and sizes and all of that. But yeah.
Now that I can 100% relate to, 100%. I
Yeah.
was a cheerleader. I hung out with all the athletes. I did hacky sack and skateboarding with all the grungy people. I was in a part of every single group and I fit in and I loved all of them. And that's
Yeah.
another thing Brett will say too about me, that I truly like will just say, I'll meet somebody, I'll just be like, I just love that person. Like all of the different types of people, yes, I do feel like I can fit in and I really truly enjoy and love.
Yes. Yeah. So hopefully that gives you a picture of like how having an undefined center can be challenging, but also at the same time, on the other side of that, there are advantages. There are gifts that come from being a little bit more fluid and flexible in how you perceive and understand that energy. And so when we do a full session with someone, I won't go through all of Allison's white centers with you now because we'd be here for an hour, but yeah, that's really where some of the biggest benefits come from, another one that I do kind of feel like maybe we should mention is the spleen. So
Mm,
Allison also has an undefined spleen. And so within the spleen, all of the gates within the spleen, it's all about survival and safety and health. It's kind of that intuitive knowing about what's safe and what's healthy and that access with intuition. And so maybe having that undefined spleen is what makes you not feel like you can trust that intuitive
mm,
sense that you get from people or can't rely on it because it is fluid and flexible. So the
Yeah.
gates that are activated in your spleen give you a lot of insight into what your fears are. Um, so yeah, that's another thing that can be really helpful is understanding which fears are the ones that are getting activated because they're the gates of your spleen, especially if it's undefined, but really for both undefined and defined. Um, and then the not self there is holding on to what isn't good for you, right? So even though Allison has an undefined G center and isn't designed to stay in the same career for her whole life, she probably, because of that fear of letting go of what was known and familiar from that place of wanting peace as a manifester, stayed in a career for 20 years, even though in her heart she knew there was something more she was feeling called to do, that there was another way for her to kind of make the impact and difference in the world that she felt called to make. And I don't know, Allison, do you want to kind of talk about how human design helped you to have the courage to make that big
Oh,
leap?
yes, because that is true. I loved my place of employment. I loved the people that I work with. I even loved a lot of the job that I did. But it makes sense that there came a time where I just was feeling called to do something different. And I tried to ignore it because it didn't feel safe. It didn't feel, all of those things, logical, anything. And, um, but when I remember, like, probably the first thing that really stood out to me about my personal chart was being a manifester. And manifestors are really here to initiate based on their inspirations. And it was interesting because even with a really solid full-time job, I was the breadwinner for our family, carried all the benefits. Almost always had like a part-time thing, like a side gig, because I can look back now and see that in my role, because a lot of what we did from state health agency perspective, and it was education and almost like an auditing role, really important, work for the federal resources that were coming in. We kind of had to be more in like oh, I don't want to say like there's a negative connotation to this, but the thing that comes to mind is like I was a cog in a wheel. I didn't have the ability to just do things that I was inspired to do. And it wasn't, I mean, my boss was amazing and I was allowed to do things on my own, like within that, but there just still wasn't room for like manifesting like the way I wanted to. And so I remember when I heard about that, I was like, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense as to why I always feel inspired to look to do things outside of my job, which was keeping me plenty of busy and paid well, because I felt like I just wanted to do what I was inspired to do, the way I was inspired to do it. So that's the first thing. And then I also think probably, well, definitely the undefined G center that we just talked about. Like it felt very reassuring to know that there wasn't something wrong with me, but that I wasn't actually meant to have this fixed identity. Because it really did start to feel like death to my soul. And it would feel like, I would almost feel selfish for saying that, but it felt kind of like death to my soul to think that I was going to live and work my entire career in the same place doing, a lot of the same thing. And again, there wasn't anything wrong with that work. It just felt like death to my soul to do that for my entire life and just wait till retirement to start to do something different. So those two for sure. And then I think once I actually made the decision, or as I was making the decision, knowing that I was an emotional decision maker really helped because, my husband is not. He has a different way of making decisions. And he just in the moment knows 100%, feels good about it, moves forward. And as an emotional decision maker, it helped me understand that, oh, when I was in a high on my wave, I would be like, yes, this is what I'm doing. I can do this. It feels amazing. And then when I was in a low, I'd be like, what am I thinking? And so I would have to go through that whole wave. And like you explained, when you are dropping, that's a big decision. So when you're dropping that, it's a boulder at that point and letting the ripples. I remember, I made that decision and it felt good, but like I had to go through all the highs and lows and come to a place where I was really settled around it. And then I don't know if you said this, but like as emotional decision makers, we never feel 100%. So knowing that, yes, this is my decision, but oh my gosh, it doesn't feel 100% all the time. So knowing that that's just the way my body works and that's my design, um, all of that gave me confidence to leave.
Mm. So how do you feel about it now? Does it still feel like it was the right
Oh,
decision?
100%, 100%. Um, not to say that it's easy but I would not change it for anything, because I know that I'm on the path that my soul wanted me to be on, that I came here to, the work that I came here to do. And I don't regret a single piece of the past of this journey, but I just know that listening when my soul was really calling, I think that was part of that. We talked about the divine path, that's what led me to turning in and tuning in. And then human design was put in front of me. But yeah, I really know that I'm on my path. I feel really good about it. Versus if I would have stayed, I mean, I had a good life. I was very blessed. We were very comfortable, very happy. All of that has been shaken up by this decision that we made as a family. But I mean, Brad and I would say, like, we wouldn't change a thing. And it's so much more, it's just more, it's not more, but it's just very rewarding and very fulfilling and very inspiring, um, to do what I'm doing now and to do what we're doing. So,
So what do you think has been the biggest change now that you're living as a manifester?
well, I remember when I first heard I was a manifester, I like cringed and kind of like resisted it, because it felt like a lot of pressure and it felt overwhelming. But like I'm kind of getting into the place where it's fun. Like it's fun to know that this is how I was created and this is what I meant to do, and really honestly have permission to lean into that. So I talked about this earlier, but like one of the things as a manifester that you just don't expect is, I know you know this, but like I literally had a download for a book that just came out of nowhere. And it was the easiest thing I've ever done. I mean, truly. And I wrote it like in a half hour. It's a children's book. So I wrote it in a half hour and like we're planning on publishing it later this year. And it was like, oh my gosh. I wouldn't have done that before had I not known that I'm a manifester. I can do whatever I feel inspired to do, even if it doesn't seem like it fits in to the plan or the box or the mold. Because before, even if I would have entertained that idea, I would have thought, well, I can't do that. I'm not a children's book author. I had no desire ever to write one. And that doesn't fit in with what I'm doing. And it's distracting from my day-to-day work. But just knowing that, like, when it feels that easy and that fun and the inspiration just comes, like, you just go with it. And it's one of, like, I'm so excited about it. But it's like, you have that voice in your head that says, well, are people going to be like, what in the world? I thought she was, a human design coach. Like, why is she writing children's books? That's that undefined G center around identity. But now
Right.
I'm like, you know what? I can do lots of different things and I'm just going to try on different identities and why not? So, yeah.
So what do you think is easier in your life now that you're living as a manifester and following strategy and authority?
Oh my gosh. Relationships,
Mm.
understanding myself and understanding others and how we all are perfect just as we are. Um, and I think too, like, truly, I mean, this is why we talk about this, but like surrendering. Before I tried to control everything because my mind was always in control and I was trying to always strategize and control the outcome and feel like I had so much pressure to do it all the right way and make it all happen and know how it was going to turn out. And so as I've said before, like it's still work to surrender, but it just feels so good because I now know, just from the way that all of this happened and how I was brought to this place and on this path, I now have a very, very confident knowing of how this all works to the extent that any person can, any human can. But I have so much more trust and faith, and anything, even the things that happen that I previously would have said, like, oh my gosh, why did that happen to me? That's a disaster. Now it's like, I don't know why that happened, but there is a lesson here for me, and it is happening for me. And I totally trust that it's all going to work out the way it's supposed to, and it's going to be even better than my head ever could have imagined. And that is just the best feeling. And for a manifestor, I mean, for anybody, I think that would be a good feeling. But for a manifestor to have peace around just trusting and surrendering is like, oh, I can't even say, like, it's the best way for me to live 100%.
So do you remember how long it's been since you first heard your strategy and authority, had your first reading?
So I would have just come past 3 years. 3 years.
Interesting.
3 years
So
in
you're coming up
March.
on the 3.5 mark. Do you
Yeah,
think it feels different now that you're 3 years in than it felt in the first year?
100%. Yes. Because I mean, like you say, I'm still coming up. I'm still more on this side than I am on this side in terms of the human design timeline.
Yeah, there's
But
7 years. So they
yes,
say it takes 7 years to decondition,
yeah,
which in my mind, that makes sense because I don't know, I say this all the time, but it takes 7 years for all the cells in your body to regenerate. So now after 7 years, all of your cells will be in the energy of living in alignment with and following your strategy and authority. And as opposed to we spend our whole lives in the energy of our conditioning and our not self. So yeah, and so there's definitely a real noticeable difference around the 3.5 year mark. And especially on the other side of that, because now you have more cells in the energy of alignment than not. So yeah, it's
yeah,
exciting.
yeah. But I think in the very beginning, I mean, it's just natural. I still wanted to intellectually
Yeah.
understand everything and apply
Right.
it in the way.
Yeah.
And it's like, you kind of have to go through that, but it's like when you can get to the point of like really settling in, because I've always been super in my head. I think a lot of people are, but
Mhm.
I think when you can get to the point where you just like really settle in, and like for me, it was slow down and start to like process things, like just surrender and process things as they come. Um, and I think you can attest to this. Now things have kind of slowed down. But no, I handle stress so much better. I handle all of these things so much better. But look back, because you've been my guide through this process, on like how many times that emotional wave was so deep, and like I would just be sobbing to you and like just a complete mess. And that was all okay, but like I don't have those extreme swings as much. I think because when it does go to a low, like I just can feel, and I sit with that and I handle it probably a little better. I think before I was like panicking and trying to get out of that low and like attach stories to it. And um but and I think another thing too is that what you told me, it has stuck with me, is that in one of those like sobbing moments, and I was like, everything, what's going on? This is all, my job has changed, my house has changed, all of these things have changed. And you were like, really, like you are meant to, because you've been so conditioned for so long, like you're meant to, like they say with human design, that you really like things will start to, how did you say it? Like
Yeah. I mean,
really,
it makes sense. Major things do need to change when you're following strategy and
yes,
authority, especially if you were really in not self before, because the decisions you made from not self can't lead to the same things that they would have led to if you'd been following strategy and authority. So it's
right,
actually a good sign when major things are shifting and changing,
right,
because that's really
yes,
an outward evidence that you are making a shift and making a change
yeah.
and aligning more with who you're meant to be and the life you're meant to live and the path you're meant to be on.
Well, and I think it's important to say too that number one, not everybody is probably living as out of alignment as I was. I mean, truly, some people are just naturally living more aligned. And I think I was coming into that place as I kind of found human design. But I think the other thing too is that's what I needed to happen for me. I needed to take a leap and leave my job. I needed somebody to knock on my door and sell my home. Like I needed those big shakeups for me to actually become who I am meant to be. But not everybody has to have like those extreme things
I
happen,
think too
right?
that might have something to do with being that manifester and going at that manifester like speed of lightning. That's so
Right.
much
That's
faster than the rest of us too.
yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. All right. So anything else that you want to say about your chart or about what's different that you're than would have been if you hadn't found human design?
No, I mean, I think I've said, well, I could again talk about it forever.
Right.
But I do just think that it honestly has been such a gift.
Mm,
And I know for you and for me, and that is truly why we want to share this and why we're doing what we
mhm.
do.
Yeah. Right.
And
And I think,
someday we'll publicly share again, like all of the crazy things that happened, but including Surrender Story and how that all came about. But it's just truly miraculous. It's truly miraculous to me. So
all right. So, and I know that like you'd mentioned something about your post with the new addition to the family that
yeah,
you had recently, and the idea that you had of using a
yeah,
human design, reading as a gift for a new mom.
yeah.
But
So
yeah.
yes, I became a yaya for the second time, which is grandma in our family. And I just as I was writing, just sharing a picture of our new addition, I thought, oh my gosh, like this is such a great gift because, like most of the world, we have everything we need. And it's always like trying to figure out what to give others and what to ask for gifts. And I was like, how amazing would it be to give people the gift of a human design reading for a newborn? Or, I mean, even my mom for Mother's Day, or it's just like, this is such an amazing gift. I just said that, not even meaning to, but like it's been such a gift in my life that I can't think of a better thing to gift yourself or somebody else in terms of like something that's truly life changing and that keeps giving. So we are definitely going to be offering human design readings. We already do, but as a gift that you can give others. And so we'll just have that information available through all of the ways that you can contact us. But truly, I think it's something that people should consider because it has, and looking at when you raise children, we didn't even go into that, but people who follow us, we can see as I have smaller children than you, but with children, I've had my baby who's just turned 3 since learning human design. And so I've known his design since he was born. And it's so fascinating to see how he literally lives into it, but then how we unintentionally, most of the time, start to condition him away from that. So it's been really fascinating. And I think that if you can give that to somebody or to yourself as you're raising a child and understand their design from birth or as early as possible, that it's just the most amazing thing. So, but it's never too late. My mom's celebrating her 70th birthday soon, and I plan on gifting this to her as well. So,
Awesome. Well, definitely. Thank you for letting us dive into your chart. Talking
yes.
design is definitely my favorite thing to do. But yeah, so if you're watching this and you watch all the way to the end, thank you for spending this time with us. We really love sharing this information because we know how life-changing it can be. So if you're here to the end with us, thank you so much. And, if there's anything we can do to support you or anyone you know in human design, please reach out. We're here.
Thank you.